Hi guys, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. We help Muslims and non-Muslims alike to understand and handle Islam in the 21st century. We consider ourselves to be decent human beings, so we condemn categorically any abuse, oppression, misogyny, slavery, violence, anything like that. We do embrace, however, free speech and also criticism, even if it is directed at us, if it is factual and constructive criticism. We focus on Islam exclusively. So if you're curious about anything Islam, you've come to the right place. Now, we don't attack, which is aggressive, destructive, and antagonistic, neither Islam nor Muslims. We ask questions and show facts. We refute false claims and present the reality of Islam, which is political Islam. We inspect, investigate, research, analyze, and then report and critique on Islam, the ideology, not the people. Now, the live stream goes to YouTube and Facebook, and there are three ways that you can participate in this. Either you join us in the live written chat, you can join the panel during the live show, or later on watch and comment the archive. And anyone can join to comment, critique, contribute, or question. This is not a Dawa channel with censorship. Don't go to Patreon, don't go to PayPal. Everything here is free. The way we work is usually we have some news, some Krazy Komments, a segment where we go and read the Quran, and then a discussion on the theme of the month, followed by integrating the live chat, ending with a Hadith of the week. If this is not enough Islam for you, there's still the Discord channel where you can discuss with us without anything being recorded. See you later and enjoy the Gin and Tonic Show. Hello, welcome and join, welcome. And we are so happy to see you here on the Gin and Tonic Show. It is Friday, it is the 9th of July, 2021. And I want to welcome our guests. I want to welcome the panel. Welcome, Mr. Mustafa.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, Brother Stops and Brother Rob. How are you guys doing today?
Yeah, all good. Good evening to you guys. Good evening to the viewers. And if you're watching this later as a recorded view, good evening to everybody.
And welcome to the chat. Welcome to the people who are going to accompany us through our wonderful journey through Islam for today. Now, as usual, I'm going to start off with the inspiration of the week. Otherwise, but we are going to be a little bit racy today, but in as much as we're going to race through because we have a longish video lined up for you guys. So we're going to be a little bit short on the usual stuff. So this is the inspirational poster for today. Allah, renew the Iman in my heart. This is like, renew. This reminds me of like tires, like your Iman need to be renewed, like tires need to be renewed. So your Iman wears out. So you start.
Just tell people what Iman is again, Stops.
Iman
is the faith.
The faith, yeah. So Iman is the Arabic word for faith because it says here, Allahumma jadli imanan fi qalbi. So it's pretty common actually.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if we got new people, they might not know what that is.
Yeah, perfect. No, it's a good point. But it's funny for me because it seems that this runs down and needs to be replenished from time to time, which in my eyes is a little bit ridiculous, but there you have it. I mean, this is the way that it goes. So you need to renew your Iman from time to time. Okay, and this brings us to the next segment, which is the news. There's something which is quite weird, and I don't know if you've already noticed, but at the moment we cannot broadcast, we cannot stream to Facebook. Because today I received this. You recently posted something that violates Facebook policy, so you're temporarily blocked from using this feature. So I cannot stream, I cannot comment, I cannot do anything on Facebook. So if you look at the bottom, you will see if you think this doesn't go against our community standards, let us know. You need very good eyes to see that this let us know is actually in like dark blue in the form of a link. The problem is if you go there what happens is this: we could not process your request. Please try again later. So if you were to tell people, no, you're full of shit, there's nothing wrong with this, you can't. Now, what was so offensive, so violent, so whatever, that I had to be banned, blocked for 30 days from Facebook? Well, it's this. There was a discussion on texts in Islam. And the question was, why is it that God first made the Christians and the Jews and everything? Why not go straight to Muslims? So I said, well, about the text, well, people lie, because people tell you bullshit about the text, about the contents of the text of the Quran, of the Hadith, and so on. And Muslims are ignorant about what these texts say. Now, I could have said, there have been instances where people have been known not to tell the complete, honest truth. And I could have said there are some Muslims who, on occasion, are not quite aware of the contents of their own texts. I could have done that, and I probably would have gone away with that. But I was too lazy. And because to me it is so flippant obvious that I just said, look, people lie. That's it. And Muslims are ignorant about their text. So both these statements are actually correct. And I get blocked for 30 days from Facebook for saying something like this.
Well, next time, try to use the word. I've been also flagged a few times for using the word Muslims, or even Pakistanis as well. So instead, use the word like followers of Islam or believers. Be very kind of distant from the word, but oddly specific. Be very careful. Otherwise, Facebook could potentially flag you, or you could be reported or something.
Exactly. Like that. Yeah. This is where we are today. So Facebook and YouTube, Twitter as well, they have such a tight grip on the critics of Islam. It's actually amazing. As soon as you say something like Muslims are ignorant, which is the case, all right, they immediately grab you, squeeze you, and hold you out to dry, and say, no, you've been naughty. You're not allowed to do that.
Listen, stop. I have been banned.
Naughty. You teasing me, you naughty.
God bless
that?
Mufti. Yes, God bless Mufti Abu Layth. If he exists, God bless Mufti Abu Layth.
Sorry, you were saying?
Yes, I've been permanently banned from TikTok. Again, for the third time.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've been banned from YouTube permanently, forever, for life, never again, because it's crazy. So I'm going to stay away from Facebook. I'm going to close this group that I'm running. That's it. I'm going to give up on Facebook, because this is what happens. Okay, the consequences are that I am the one, and in what you call this, not as a consequence of that. There's a word I'm missing. Okay, doesn't matter. So as a consequence of that, everybody else now gets to suffer because we can't post to Facebook. Just because I was too lazy to write what you said, which is absolutely right. But this is what we have to do today. To be able to comment something, we have to go to all these roundabout ways of expressing something that is absolutely quite obvious and everything. So anyway. Now, there's another thing that I want to draw your attention to, and that this is quite hilarious, actually. Now, there's a seminar. They call this a seminar. So Sources has decided to go on Sapiens and say to people, well, I'm going to show that the adversaries get this, right? Now, they are allowed to do that. They are calling atheists adversaries of reason, and then he says why atheism is irrational. Now, the funny thing is that this, if I go to this explanatory text, where do I have the explanatory text? No, this is not this. I'm getting mixed up here. This is the one. In the explanatory text, it says that a key characteristic of what makes us human is our ability to reason. We intuitively accept that we are rational creatures with reliable cognitive faculties and blah, blah, blah. And that best explains the key feature of humanity. And then he says, well, but you can't do that if you're an atheist. So what he says, and this is how dishonest this guy is. Now, I've shown many times that he's like a liar, really a liar, somebody A lie is if you say something that you know is not true in order to deceive somebody else. And I've shown that so many times that Sources is a liar. And this is how dishonesty is. He says, we accept that we are rational creatures with reliable cognitive faculties that can produce reliable, true beliefs. Now, the seminar will show how atheistic philosophical naturalism fails to adequately explain our ability to reason. Now, there are so many things wrong here. Because number one, an atheist is simply somebody that does not accept the claims or the statements of a theist. A theist says, I believe a God exists. The atheist does not. So that is it. So if I have another facet of my personality, which is naturalism, that's cool. But now what he automatically does, he doesn't go for methodological naturalism, but philosophical naturalism. Now what that means is the one says that nature explains nature. So natural phenomena are best explained by using natural explanations. And if you go into philosophical naturalism, it says, hell yes, it does. And that's the only difference. And what he is now trying to show is that atheists are totally off their rocker by claiming that right from the start, science is limited because it's not allowed to even go and look at it. An atheist has no opinion on science. Why he constantly mixes atheists with scientists, I do not know. Why he automatically mixes up atheists with philosophers, I do not know. And yet he does it again and again. Now, the funny thing is, if you look carefully, this was posted in June as this week's online academic seminar. So I posted there. Thank you very much for this. I'm very much looking forward to taking this apart and destroying it. Then lo and behold, when this was supposed to happen on the Thursday, the 1st of July, it didn't. 5 minutes, no, while it was supposed to happen, I don't know, 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. or something, I can't remember. Suddenly it came up and said, well, actually, no, we're postponing for a week. Now what has happened, the whole thing has been postponed until September. So on the 9th of September, now this is going to happen. And I don't know if you can actually see this. No, I can't zoom into this for some odd reason. Because I made a comment there. And the guy above me said, we waited last week only to be told that the talk, will be postponed. Can you give us an explanation? So I said, well, it's actually easy. He cannot find any irrational atheists. And this comment on a channel that they don't know stayed. Now, I made a screenshot where I took stop spamming. That was immediately deleted. So I took stop spamming 2, which they didn't know yet. And this one stayed for, I don't know if it's still there. But at least for some time, it stayed as an explanation why they didn't do that. So I thought this was quite funny. Okay, now the next piece of news that we have is we are going into Dhul Hijjah. In other words, they're waiting for the moon. So everybody's now checking, waiting to see the moon. The first one says, I see the moon, hello. And then he's going to go back to his boss and say, I saw the moon. So now we can start the month. What that means is we have a holy month, the last month, which is the month where you do two things. One thing is you sacrifice things because Abraham sacrificed or was willing to sacrifice his son, and therefore you go and sacrifice an animal, and you go on Hajj. Now you can't do that this year because there's a tiny little virus that is more powerful than Allah that is stopping people from going on Hajj, which you have to do, which is compulsory for a Muslim. If there's any way that they can manage to go on Hajj, they need to do this. They need to run around this black stone in Mecca. They need to throw little pebbles at a rock and at a column. And this year they can't do it. But anyway, this is now this month that is happening, the holy month. Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no, Zulhajj. So Eidul, the big Eid they call it, like they sacrifice goats, and you'll see in Pakistan or in the streets of any Muslim country, you will see like streets of blood of animals. So be wary of that on the 10th of Zulhajj specifically.
It's quite sick actually. but what can you do? All right, and then the final thing, if you have followed the news, you've seen that the West, in other words, all non-Islamic, non-Afghani troops are being pulled out of Afghanistan. Now, what that means is that the Taliban, being a religious group, they're now running around distributing roses, flowers, and anything, giving this to the people, to show them how nice they are. No, I'm joking. They're running around killing everybody. So the Taliban are now they're incredibly brutal. It's a terrorist organization, and they want to take over Afghanistan, and it's going to be called Talibanistan or something. Now, Taliban actually means we are the students, and what they are doing is they are trying to ruin Afghanistan the way that they tried to do it 20 years ago. And then the West pulled in and said, listen, guys, no, this is not on. And they tried to curb this, and they brought some stability to the country. I mean, I was there for quite some time, like for 3/4 of a year, working together with Afghanis to replace the broken infrastructure. And this worked very well. So people were quite happy to work together with us, and everything was great until the Taliban staged the first attack on a location inside Kabul, which before everybody told me, no, you're perfectly safe. And I was in this arena with 5-meter high walls. Nothing could happen to me. And they breached it and killed everybody around me. And this is where I learned that you can hear a bullet before you actually hear the shot. So this is funny. So people always say, they're so peaceful and everything. I say, well, I was on the wrong end of an AK-47. And people say, no, you haven't. Well, I've still got the room card. I've still got, all the, the stuff, the memorabilia that goes with the hotel stay at the time. So there you go. All right. Then what we're going to do is we are going to quickly go through some crazy comments. And we start off with this one, which is quite crazy. This is the reason why I am an atheist. I am a pedophile. Now, this is coming from a Muslim. How can a Muslim say that an atheist is a pedophile? Now, the funny thing is they can get away with this. Now, if I were to write this, I am not an atheist because I'm not a pedophile, I would immediately get blocked, because this would be a reference to Muhammad. So Muslims would immediately report me as a Islamophobe or something, and I would get blocked. Now, when a Muslim says it, it's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. I don't really get this. They are so shit scared of atheists. It's actually amazing. All right, now Mustafa, this is your thing, because you made a post on TikTok, and then the subsequent replies, and there's 8 of them. So run through them as quickly as you can.
Okay, so like I posted this: religion doesn't provide morals, blah blah blah. He didn't, and it kind of mixes the facts of the Bible as well as the Quran. Right now, let's go to the comments. All right. First one, my favorite: death to the Abrahamic God. And then the second one is Muslim, not our Jesus Christ, then heals. Christians beware.
But hang on, so death to the Abrahamic God?
Yep.
But that includes Allah.
Indeed, yeah. This one I found pretty hilarious. And then the following: okay, atheist edgelord, TikTok break is over. Time to go back to Reddit.
Okay.
And then it's like, God used Moses to lead Israelites out of slavery. That is similar to colonial American slavery.
Oh, fuck.
All right. If religion wasn't a thing, man, I can't see this clearly. Oh, there we go. If religion wasn't a thing, there would be no morals and laws. Lol, imagine humans with nothing to hold them back. Who gonna him that God did forbid some of those things? Jesus, they need to learn how to write. You're an atheist. This isn't a conversation you want to have.
Yeah.
Right? And then BSM Dandon says, give me one objective reason why racism is wrong from an atheist worldview.
Oh, fuck. This is crazy.
And then there's, I think, it's the same one.
Oh, true.
Yeah, it's the same
Why do
one.
I have this twice? Sorry.
Okay. And then there's like, you clearly haven't read the Bible. And then the following, oh, another ex-Muslim who lets the beautiful religion live in their head rent-free.
They love that expression.
Yeah. And then they say you don't understand religion without saying you don't understand.
Huh?
I even had some crazy questions there too. It's like, you read the 10 Commandments and then come back. And then Nick Tusteezy, atheist Reddit user moment.
Are they afraid of Reddit?
I don't know. I don't even use Reddit.
No, me too.
Yeah.
I mean, Reddit is like a conversation platform where you can have discussions, you ask questions, people answer, and then it's backwards and forwards. So you have one thread on one topic, and then you go to the next one. That's all it is.
Yep. And this Shizikzo Piled says, why are those things wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
And then this person's like, first off, some sins you said were Old Testament. Second, the first one was actually all sins. Huh?
Okay.
Actually, he did forbid most of them and allowed most of those in the rest.
Well, there is a reason why this is called Krazy Komments, right?
Yeah. Any religion will uphold human rights. God said to love others as yourself.
Yeah, like
I'm yet to find that. That's why the proper... Okay, laugh. That's why the proper Islam is the way of life. Even teaches you how to eat and sip, etc. You know that? It teaches you how to sip. Okay.
Well,
Then
the best is how it teaches you how to drink water.
Yeah, basically, they eat and sip. Okay, but then without religion reasons, why is killing wrong?
Yeah.
Has this person ever read any religious book? And then this gypsy crusader, fatherless behavior. And then I think r/ is like atheist, another Reddit reference. What's up with these Reddit references? Atheism moment, all right? And then this why not Shisui says, you do know it's forbidden to think you're superior in any way to any human, right? In Islam, by the way, I don't know about other religions. In Islam, he did though. And then laughed, like, oh, geez. That's why the proper Islam is the way of life. Even teaches, okay, it's the same sip guy. Commented again.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. It's Krazy Komments. That's why it's called Krazy Komments. That's exactly the reason why. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip the Koran Korner. And lo and behold, look what we've done. We've managed it in 23 minutes. Thank you very much for racing through that. Giving people just a taste, just a hint, just a sort of an indication what it is, what we mean when we talk about Krazy Komments. Okay, so what we've done is we selected a video for today, which is a little bit longer. And this is why we're going to ask your indulgence. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to run through this. I'm going to, keep back and try and comment as little as possible. But it's a fascinating video. I've not watched, all of it. I've just had a taste of it. So, Rob, are you ready running this thing?
Yes, indeed. Let me share that.
So let's go through that. And, it's the usual thing. If you want to comment in the chat, you just type one enter. This catches our attention and we'll quickly stop it. Otherwise, what Mustafa and I are going to do, we're just going to scream our heads off, stop if we want to say something. Then we can make a comment.
Yeah, I won't be able to see the comments at the moment. I'm looking at the video. I'm not. I don't have two screens in front of me at the moment. So if you want to read something, then you'll just have to sort of stop or read it out when there's a moment to do so. Okay, so this is with one of our Muslim apologists, this Imran Hassan. And he's speaking to an atheist fellow. So let's see. Atheist agrees you cannot deny God. Well, let's see if the atheist actually does agree that and whether he's got any good reason. Hint, I don't think so. Let's see.
So let's talk about some really basic.
Rob, before we start, I'm sorry to have to do this, but if you cannot deny God, well, this is correct, because you cannot deny God because it hasn't been, shown to exist. You can only deny what has been shown to exist. So you cannot deny the existence of James Bond because it's never been claimed that it exists. So for me, this word deny means that there is something that you can deny. But if there is no God, there is nothing that you can deny. So the statement you cannot deny God is actually correct because there's nothing there that you can deny. So I think we need to be clear on what it is that we're talking about. Now, I've heard people say, well, you can deny anything. You can deny the existence of James Bond, even though he doesn't exist, because it is a mentioned character in a book, and therefore you can deny this. But that, in my eyes, that's not realistic. So just to be sure, there are different ways of looking at this word deny, just from the beginning, just to make this clear that we are aware that there are differences in understanding this.
Yeah, I think there are differences. For me, James Bond and God are slightly different in the sense that I don't think anybody thinks that James Bond is real. But people like this Muslim fellow and others think that God is real. So I guess in this particular case, it would be denying the proposition that Allah exists, for example. I think most of us would deny that that's the case, but we wouldn't deny that James Bond exists in the sense that he's a reality. Obviously, it's a fictional character, and so that proposition would be, I think, perhaps a different category because there isn't a claim that James Bond exists in the same way that this fellow is claiming that Allah exists, for example. So
maybe I should take
there's just
Sherlock
different ways you
Holmes.
can look at it. Yeah,
Because
exactly.
Sherlock Holmes, a lot of people actually come to London, to Baker Street, to see where Sherlock Holmes lived, not even aware that this is a fictional character.
Well, presumably or hopefully that they recognize that it's a fictional character. If they
No.
don't, well, obviously, then
There are really people
yeah.
who believe this. They really think that he existed, because it doesn't say anywhere. Okay, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
We can discuss, try to get somewhere with, and maybe someone watching can benefit from too. Sure. So, should I begin with the?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Yeah, feel free.
So, I've looked into atheism to an extent.
Yeah.
So, understand the basic philosophy, the basic
No.
thinking behind it. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong. As far
Well, we'll see whether he does. Obviously, he's looked into it a little bit. So let's see what he claims atheism is.
Well, I've schooled him for something like 6 or 7 years, and even though I've told him for 6 or 7 years that he does not know what an atheist is and what an atheist actually is, he still does not understand it. He does what I showed earlier, that people like Tsortzis, because he is a student of Tsortzis. Now, if Tsortzis teaches him an atheist is somebody who is committed to philosophical naturalism, then this is what he will parrot. This is what he will then take on board without thinking about it any further. This is the problem here.
slight distinction between atheism and naturalism.
And maybe I'm not the best person qualified to say that, but I think there is a difference.
But
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clearly there's a difference between atheism and naturalism. One is the lack of belief or the denial that a God exists, or the disbelief in a God or gods, and the other is the belief that reality is entirely natural. And you can be an atheist and not a naturalist. I'm not sure whether a naturalist could ever be a theist. I mean, I think there are, in fact, some people who claim to be natural theists, but I mean, that's just a vanishingly small minority of people. But there's clearly a difference between atheism and naturalism.
No, I think it goes more into deism.
speaking of atheism, would you say atheists deny the existence of God?
Yes, I think atheism, as far as I'm aware, does deny the existence of a deity. It doesn't just say that we don't know. It goes one step further and says that it doesn't exist.
And you yourself would hold that position.
Well, this is quite difficult because I can't say with certainty that I hold that position, but I would hold the position that
Okay, so this, as far as I can tell, there's no reason for an atheist to say anything with certainty. That's a red herring on the atheist side. We don't have to say that. All we say is we believe a God does not exist. And by God, at least for me, I've modified my position recently for a very specific reason. But I would consider myself an apatheist atheist, and so for me, I disbelieve any of the personal gods, and by God I mean something that is some sort of intelligence that is all good. Because if there was an intelligence that was not all good, then by most people's definition that would simply be, something like a demon or not God or a creator or an all-powerful entity, but not a God. So one of the attributes of God seems to be, omnibenevolence, all goodness. It has to be a mind, obviously a creator, etc. And it would have communicated with people. That's what the majority of humans think on the planet. The deist type of gods, I'm apatheist towards. Apatheist is simply somebody who doesn't care, who's not interested. And the very specific reason for that, which I won't go into now, but that it saves me having to deal with, the vague deist type of gods, because that really isn't particularly interesting. I might ask somebody why they believe that, etc. But really, for me at least, I'm interested in the personal gods that supposed to have had a communication with humans, and there's some consequence, and there's some real world consequences that people believe all of this sort of stuff. But no atheist that I'm aware of says that you need to know with certainty. So he doesn't need to bring that in. He just has to say, I don't believe that a God exists. Boom, there you go. Or, some people in the US, at least mostly, will say, hey, I lack a belief in God. Although that's hopefully becoming less of a phenomenon nowadays.
it either doesn't exist, or if it does exist, it definitely isn't what the Abrahamic religions say it is. That it's
Would you say more agnostic?
With regards to the existence of God, I would say I'm maybe more agnostic.
Okay, that's it. So
Okay, again, we just got to be clear what agnostic is and what this guy thinks agnostic is. I'm not sure. For me, an agnostic is the undecided position. There's a proposition that a God exists, whatever you take God to mean. Like I say, I've got a specific idea of what I think a God is. And the agnostic isn't, for me, and I think that maybe Stops and I slightly disagree here. For me, it's the undecided. I don't lean either way. I'm on the fence, or somebody who isn't an agnostic is on the fence. For me, it's got nothing to do with knowledge, because these are belief claims. The claims that are being made for an atheist, agnostic, or a theist, generally speaking, are belief claims. They're not knowledge claims. And I think that was originally this idea that, at least when I first heard it, came from people like Matt Dillahunty, this agnostic atheist. But that's not a term that I think is useful, and indeed I think it's what's the word? It's redundant, because if you don't believe and you took the idea that agnostic is something that means I don't know, well, since knowledge is a subset of belief, then if you don't believe, you automatically don't know that God exists. So it's irrelevant to use the word agnostic. Now, if you take agnostic differently to my view, where it's something else, then maybe you could come up with something else. So I don't know if Stops is on the same page, or maybe okay.
No, I have a very different view. For me, both words, atheist and agnostic, are redundant. I think it's quite silly. The same way as you don't have words relating to astrology. I don't go to a dinner table and say, well, I am an astrologist. That's silly. This is something that went out like 300 years. The same way as astrology, or let's say the horoscopes, for example, have gone to page 15 in a newspaper. This is where gods are on their way to. I mean, they're going to join the astrology department pretty soon. So what I'm saying is, I'm taking the historical view, the etymology from throughout history, where I'm saying you have a theist who believes a God exists, and you have the opposite, the atheist, who does not believe God exists. Okay, so that's very straightforward from theos, from the Greek word theos, with God. And then, as far as the agnostic is concerned, this also comes from the Greek, which means with the knowledge. So it comes from the Greek word knowledge and conviction. And therefore, the agnostic is somebody who is sure, who has the knowledge, who has the confidence to say, yes, a God exists. And I'm saying, no, I do not. So the agnostic is somebody who does not have the confidence and knowledge of the gnostic, and the atheist does not have the belief that a theist has. So the one is belief, the other one is knowledge. And that is why I'm saying no, it has nothing to do with sitting on the fence and being undecided. It is just saying that you cannot know anything about the existence of gods until you have gone and thoroughly searched throughout the universe and any other universes before you can say there are no gods. So I'm saying I cannot be sure that there are no gods. I'm sure that the Abrahamic gods can't exist due to logical exclusions, but not in general. So I'm not claiming that no God exists, but I don't believe they do. That is how I sort of, my sort of bubble.
So what would you call somebody then who says, well, I'm undecided? What label would you give somebody like that?
Undecided.
Says, I've weighed up the propositions, the for and against, and I'm in the middle. I'm literally a fence. What would you call somebody like that?
Undecided.
Okay, so you just label it undecided. Okay.
Yes, because for me the etymological sequence does not provide this conclusion that you arrive at undecided or on the fence if you're using agnostic. Now, if you take agnostic, we do not know whether or not a God exists. I'm totally on your side here. Yes, I agree. It's redundant because you cannot know this. Absolutely. This is why I say we should not use this word, because it's a silly word to use. Now, what has happened, and I agree again with you, that over time people have realized that the word is redundant and have shifted the contents of the word, of this container, because words are simply containers. So there has been a shift from the not knowing to the, well, either I don't give a damn or I don't really care, I don't know, maybe there are, maybe there are not. This undecided sort of feature. Instead of calling it undecided, they call it agnostic. Okay, so yeah, this is why maybe the language shifts. I just think that I'm going to be difficult and maintain the etymological stance, the historical stance, and say, all right, there has been a progression throughout history with belief and knowledge, and that's where I'm going to stay, just to make it 100% sure.
Okay, and we'd love to hear your comments in the chat as well. What you guys think?
Okay, that being the case, so let's begin here with this. Would you appreciate if I was to say that certain realities we are aware of in life, for example, morality, moral truths, human consciousness, human rationality, our cognitive faculties which lead us to truth, concepts such as truth and falsehood, good and evil. Would you agree that these things I've just mentioned can only truly be made sense of through the existence of God? Assuming what you said your position to be that.
Okay, so this is an assertion, right? It's dressed up as a question. So again, we've got to be very careful with this, because it's very easy for somebody to go, no, I don't. And then the assertion that he's made that's dressed up as a question, he goes, okay, what's your reasons for that? But in actual fact, as is clear, if we slow this down and explain it like we are now, he's made the assertion and then tagged a question mark on the end. And the immediate response for me is, why do you think that's the case? You've made the assertion, dressing it up as a question. What's the argument, or what's your best argument, or why do you believe that?
Yeah. Okay, and I'm laughing because exactly he's making assertions which are totally silly, because what he's doing, these are the most, I don't know, fought over concepts in philosophy. None of these things have any, let's say, foundation that everybody agrees on. These things are fluid, and there's no two people who will agree on these things, because everything here is relative to your own position. Because, okay, it doesn't matter, but this is why I'm giggling, because it's quite silly the way that he comes here with the most complicated questions and pretending as though because he believes in a God and he can just stick his God in there, that settles it. It doesn't. This is totally out in the open, and we do not have answers to these questions. And he just goes ahead and says, well, I've got a God, and therefore everything is explained. Whatever my God says is true, is good, is everything. And then once you start questioning that, then he starts fumbling, and then he starts backtracking, and then he realizes, no, he's out in the open. So, yeah.
And Mustafa, of course, let us know if you've got any thoughts as well. I'll just wait for you to say it.
Definitely.
Otherwise, I'll assume you're along with us.
Oh yeah, no, I'm also listening to you guys. I'm also learning with you guys as well. Don't worry.
Okay, great.
That's a very difficult question. These realities that you talk about, rationality.
Let's take one. Take rationality.
Morality. Yeah, I mean, whichever one you want to pick. You can't just prove morality because of morality. There is you could say that there is something behind it. There is some. You can explain. I think you can explain it with a God, but I don't think that's a very reasonable explanation in my opinion.
Okay. So let's take rationality for example. Human cognition. Yeah.
Okay, obviously, Imran missed it there, right? He's the fellow in the purple said, I don't think it's a very reasonable explanation. Now, if you were on the ball, you go to because he sort of took the bait there and thought it was a question when in fact it was an assertion, and answered it, and then made an assertion of his own. The Muslim that was on the ball will go, hang on a moment, you said it's unreasonable, or you don't think it's reasonable. What's your reasons for that? And now the fellow in the purple shirt, pink shirt, whatever. He's going to have to defend that. So again, you just got to be careful with that. If you want to do that and you've got good reasons, by all means, present them. But also don't let your interlocutor off the hook, as often happens, because you're so ready to say, no, I don't think you're right or you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. But don't let them off the hook. Otherwise, they never have to defend their claims. So fortunately for him, Imran didn't pick up on that. And he just went with one of these things and didn't ask him to justify why he thinks it's not a reasonable explanation.
No, we're rational. We assume it. So even with the discussions we have it with the basis that we are rational beings. I mean, if we were to say, I may not be, even if you entertain the idea, I may not be rational, then you can never be certain of your rational faculties. Therefore, it's pointless having discussions even like this.
No, that's just gibberish, what he said there. You don't need to be certain to accept that you have rational faculties. And you could also accept, and some people do, that humans are irrational, and I think we all are to some degree. I guess the real argument is to what degree are humans irrational. I think to a level, almost every human is irrational at some point, but you don't need to have perfectly functioning rational faculties. You just need reliable faculties to work out whether you are rational or not. So I think that was kind of a bit of gibberish that he uttered there.
And I think as a pointer, what I have found, what works much better is to go in a situation like this to establish commonalities. In other words, go and take the facts that you can agree on, instead of keeping on saying, well, this is rational, this is irrational, and then bringing up more and more examples. This doesn't really work. What I found in a discussion on Discord is that establishing commonalities where you say, okay, if we take facts, do you agree that facts representing reality is something that is rational, that you cannot go against? And then take it step by step from there onwards, and then establish what it is that you can agree on. I think that's a much more productive way of going around it. I've also had to change my position because I was always, you guys know me by now, that I was confrontative, that I was the one who was strident and shouting, no. But I've realized, no, actually going and first establishing something that you can agree on and then taking it from there is more productive.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go that far. I would say that maybe I'm uncertain about my rational faculties, but I can still have a conversation.
So let's clarify. So would you say you're uncertain about your conclusions, or are you uncertain about the ability, the processing faculties to arrive at? What are you uncertain about?
Okay, maybe I'm more uncertain about the process itself.
Okay, well, again, I don't see how this is relevant one way or the other. Yeah. Whether he's certain or uncertain about his rational faculties isn't indicative of a God or not God world necessarily. So I'm not sure that this is particularly helpful. And I don't think this was the best one to go with. If I were offered that smorgasbord of what should we talk about, I'm going to go straight to the moral argument, because I think it's the one that's most powerful. It affects the most people and has the most outcome in the world. And it's the easiest one to show, in particular, that Muslims just don't have anything there. It's a vacuous claim that they have. So this one for me was probably one of the worst ones that you could go down if you want to, show that Islam is kind of at least morally bankrupt, in the sense that it doesn't have objective, which is what all of these guys seem to claim. It's the one that they organize their life around. So I think that's, for me at least, is the most practical and potentially persuasive one. Many ex-Muslims that I'm personally aware of have deconverted because of the moral reasons, not for other perhaps philosophical reasons or rational reasons. And you can deconvert for the moral reason, and it's rational, but the moral one is one of the ones that I think is most persuasive one way or the other.
Yeah. And some just hang on, stop, Rob. Yeah. So another reason, like part of it is the moral reason. Also, like, you know, there's the crap. I forgot the evidence itself, like the evidence not adding up too. So a lot of the claims of the Quran, for example, where the evidence of, you know, the existence of many of these characters, for example, like even Muhammad, it doesn't add up. Nothing adds up. So a lot of ex-Muslims also take that route. Like, you know, even historically speaking, nothing adds up in Islam.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Somebody asked me today, actually, I got a message on Discord from somebody. He said something like, I want to know in general, why you're not a Muslim? And I said, because of the Quran. That was the quick and straightforward. That's the biggest reason for me I wouldn't be a Muslim, because of your book. Everything else emanates from that. Absolutely. And when we read this book, as we all have, you know, if this is the best that your God can do, then it's a pitiful attempt, and that's the reason I'm not a Muslim.
Yeah.
So that means right now, the way you're reasoning can be wrong or can be flawed.
It could very well be.
So for example, if you hold the belief that you're an atheist, that could be false. That could be.
Okay, but this is a trivial statement. Unless you're somebody who's a fallibilist, an infallibilist, somebody who believes that you cannot make a mistake, then, you know, and I'm not aware of anybody that has defended that position. So if we're all fallibilists, i.e. that we're all of the view that we can be mistaken about our cognitive faculties, i.e. that, you know, we're not certain that we'll arrive at, you know, the quote unquote truth, if you like, which we all are, unless somebody wants to claim superhuman abilities, then it's a trivial point. So, you know, this is not a bit. And I think the other thing with Imran is he's looked at a little bit of this Christian presuppositionalism, but he doesn't really understand it particularly well. He's a bit confused about it. So we get these sort of statements that are popping up here that aren't really relevant and is simply trivially true. Yes, anybody who understands the topic is going to say, well, I could be mistaken. That's entirely possible in coming to some sort of conclusion, because I have fallible, you know, faculties, and I go by, well, most of us hopefully go by reliability and not certainty.
And the other thing that I see again and again with him is he thinks that atheism is just another version of theism. Because for him, the concept of not believing a God exists does not compute. He cannot grasp it. He cannot process this thought in his brain. So what he does is he just substitutes his belief, his set of beliefs with a God, with the book and with prophets and everything, and he just sort of tries and mold it around atheism. And then he says, well, you also have prophets, you also have a belief, you also have books, you also have things like that. You believe in testimony, you believe. So that he's trying very hard to take what he knows from his belief, set of beliefs, and tries to go and put this onto atheism. And that, of course, doesn't work. But he doesn't realize that. And it's impossible for me or anyone to teach him to get away from this, to see this as a totally different thing. He can't do that.
It could be just based on nothing, just because if you can't be, because you concluded you're an atheist or somewhat of an atheist, and you've rationally made that conclusion, right? You come to that conclusion.
I thought he said he was agnostic. Well, again, actually, I wasn't sure, but he seemed to suggest that he was agnostic in the beginning.
He did, yeah, he did in the video earlier.
Yeah.
Chosen this for the sake of doing it.
No, I mean, you know, experiences and, you know, science, you know, evolution and so forth.
It's processed through here, obviously. Because even if you use science, the whole scientific method is dependent upon your ability to reason.
Yeah, you see, exactly.
So all your experiences, you reason upon your experiences, and then.
Yeah, but this is all trivial. Yes, of course. I mean, but he's not saying anything interesting or something. And somebody else did that earlier today. I happened to be listening to something else today, and this guy was making a whole bunch of trivial statements. And at one point, I just jumped in and said, "Are you going to say something that's interesting and it might be persuasive to an atheist?" And the guy just like this just carried on making. So, and for those who don't know, a trivial statement is simply something that is obviously the case, but it's not really interesting and informative. It's something we already know, and that's all he's doing here now. He's not telling us anything interesting or something that we can respond to and go, okay, well, we disagree. It's like, you know, just saying, hey, do you know what? All humans breathe air. Well, thank you for telling me something we already knew that wasn't in any way, you know, adding to your argument or, you know, making a critique of my position or something. You're just telling me something that is trivially true.
But I am cringing because he dropped, like, it's like dropping a worm in a pond. If you drop the word science, now he's gonna run with this like a puppy. He's gonna take it, shake it, and very proudly run around with it. Don't do that. Do not go with science when you are having a religious discussion. It doesn't work.
And come to conclusions again. So the fact that you come to the conclusion that you're an atheist or somewhat of an atheist, right, is based on a rational process. So if you're saying that you can't be certain of your rational processes anymore, then you can't really conclude anything anymore.
No, that's a complete non sequitur. This is where he's just not thinking straight. I mean, he seems to be the weakest of the Ayera type guys, and this is clearly the case. That doesn't follow that if you can't be certain about your rational faculties, you can't come to a conclusion. I mean, just think about that statement for more than a few seconds. Of course, that doesn't follow. You don't need to be certain to come to a conclusion. And the better your reliability, the more reliable you'll be about the conclusion. But it doesn't follow that if you don't have certainty, that would mean that we could never come to a conclusion about anything, because none of us have certainty about our rational faculties. And even these guys that might claim to have some level of certainty, they can't demonstrate it.
I wouldn't agree with that. I think you can be uncertain about your rational process, but still make some kind of conclusion, because that's just the way
Exactly.
things are. That's the way
What would be the
human
validity?
beings would be.
Sure, but what would be the validity? So now, again, so for example, you made another claim
I
that.
know I'm being difficult. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just trying to get.
No, he's kind of said what we said here, right? He's pointed out that's a complete non sequitur. In other words, it doesn't follow one from the other. So it's an error, a blatant, straightforward error in this Imran's thinking.
Yeah.
So you made a claim that I'm not sure of my rational processes.
Yes. I'm
Now
not
that
doing
claim
so.
itself, are you sure of that claim?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you want me to go one step
Okay,
further,
but this is like trying to throw in a little bit. I said it earlier, right? Presuppositionalism, but he just doesn't really understand the topic even remotely to say that. And again, all you have to say is, no, I'm not sure of that. So, but are you sure of anything? Can you demonstrate anything to me? Because it's fine for us to say that, but he's being let off the hook. And at that point, you're going to go, okay, are you sure of it? And how can you be sure of it, right? And then he's going to babble something because he won't really understand it. But you just got to say no. And it's, by the way, it's an internalist critique, and it's a what's the term? It's like he's asking for an internalist justification, and eventually you're going to bottom out in that. So that's not really going to help you, and it's not going to help him either. So again, this is not particularly helpful either way.
And I'm hoping that Muslims are watching this to see how easy it is to avoid these pitfalls, how easy it is just to go with Islam. Don't try getting all these complicated arguments and things like that. It's not going to work. It's been tried for I don't know how many thousand years, and it's always failed. You cannot copy Christians and try and now apply the same thing that Christians have applied for the last 2,000 years. Now try and apply this for Islam and hope for a different result. It will not work. Let it go. Just leave it and go with the positive functions of Islam. There are positive functions, so why don't you go with those instead of trying this bullshit? I don't know.
Do you see? So we have to begin somewhere.
Sure.
You have to have as a foundational thing that you are rational.
But this is one other problem I have with the religious perspective, especially the Abrahamic, Jewish, Christian, Islamic perspective, is that if we don't have this base, then we can't start.
No, I would disagree with that.
Yeah.
So I would say we can start, and we are starting.
We already
So my
have,
position is this. Let me just clarify, just so I don't come across wrong.
Sure, yeah.
Is that whatever your worldview is, you're a rational being, and I'm a rational person, and we can have discourse. Yeah, our rational faculties may get things wrong through the process, but eventually we have the ability to attain truth.
Rob, can
That's what
you just
science-
stop there for a moment? The thing is that they're throwing around words. They're throwing around words like rational, but they have not defined them. They have not defined what it is that they are talking about. So he keeps on saying, well, it's rational, it's irrational, and blah, blah, blah. But you need to go and look what these words actually mean, how they are being used, because the way that you are using them, it does not make sense. No, a Muslim cannot be a rational person because it is emotional what a Muslim will say. It is not rational to believe in flying donkeys and talking ants. That is not rational. So in other words, what you are doing is you are being a Muslim based on emotions, not rational thinking. And yet they claim all the time, being a Muslim is totally rational. No, it is not. As soon as you go and look what rational actually means, no, it is not rational. And I don't understand why people don't define the words that they are talking about. before they go and talk about
Yeah, I
them.
think we've got to be, as you say, a bit careful how we use it. If we take rational to mean something like in accordance with reason or logic,
Yeah.
then and I think reason and logic are two separate things anyway, and I think sometimes reason and rationality are equated anyway. But we've got to be a bit careful. We can't say, for example, that a flying donkey is illogical, because typically when somebody says something's illogical, it would violate one of the principles of logic. And all you could say is perhaps a flying donkey violates the laws of physics. That you could say, but you wouldn't necessarily say that it violates that, because otherwise, oftentimes it's you're looking for some sort of contradiction to say, that's illogical, meaning that it violates one of these principles of logic, or it violates the law of identity or excluded middle, something like that. And it's very rare that people are that silly, although let me just say it's maybe not that rare, but it's normally reasonably rare that people violate the law of logic in that way. So when somebody has a flying donkey, for example, it would be unreasonable for sure, but I don't think we could say it's illogical, because then if somebody knows what they're talking about, they're going to say to you, where's the contradiction? And you're going to be very difficult for you to show a contradiction. But I do agree with you that you just these guys need to define it, and if it's in accordance with logic or reason, then that's fine, but then define that for us. Presumably they just automatically kind of assume that anyway, which is why they're not defining. But it is always useful to do that, because then you can always refer back to it. So I think it is good if you can do that and refer back, because it might go off the rails and then you just go back and go, but this is what we mean by it. Okay, now we bring it back to that.
Now, remember there was a stream by Ira, I think, or EF Dawa, I can't remember, on rational. Is being an atheist rational or irrational? And I collected some of these definitions, and I'm just looking them up. And it says here, a rational person is someone who is sensible, is able to make decisions based on evaluating available options using intelligent and logical thinking rather than on emotion. And I think that covers it. I mean, I've got another 2 pages on what rational is and what reason is and things like that. But this is basically it. Evaluating available options using intelligent and logical thinking rather than emotion. That is what rational is in my eyes. This is according to the dictionaries, what they think that the contents is. And this is what I go with, because it makes a lot of sense. If I apply that, then it's correct. I mean, logical is not. It's not only logical. It's intelligent and logical thinking, and not emotion. And this is exactly the differentiation where I go and apply this with the flying horse, with the flying donkey. Then this is an emotion. It's not rational because it's not intelligent or logical thinking. Not only logical, but also looking at available options. In other words, do we know this? No, we don't. Is it intelligent to think that a donkey can fly? No, it is not. And it's also illogical, so it needs to have all these different boxes ticked before you can say it's irrational. So it's not only one. I agree, but this is something that people should agree first.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't like to use the word intelligent. That's too subjective. What does it mean to be intelligent? From whose point of view? Is there some sort of objective basis for intelligence? So for me, and that's why I said, if we accept, what I said, if you don't, that's cool. But I certainly wouldn't accept that definition, because the intelligent part is just too subjective for me. You might go, okay, well, it's not intelligent to believe a donkey flies. Somebody else with a different set of prior beliefs, or what they think is prior background information, say, but hang on a moment, it is intelligent to believe that. So for me, that one I wouldn't use that. And I don't think most people, well, maybe I'm wrong, maybe people do use that, but I think it's just not strong enough to use. It's just too almost like aesthetic in a sense, subjective. So yeah, that wouldn't be a definition I would be happy with. So if you and I have a conversation, I'm going to reject that out of hand. Now you could reject mine, of course, but then you and I or whoever we're speaking to, we'd have to come to some agreement. But I'm going to be looking for something that we could say is objectively the case, rather than something like that would be almost in the eye of the beholder.
Okay, then what I would love to do is just to spend 10 minutes, not tonight, on a different level, just to go through this list that I have, and then maybe, because that would be interesting to come up with a definition that both of us could agree on, that we could use as a universal sort of basis. If somebody else comes and says, well, let's talk about rational, that you go, okay, can you agree if I make the following? proposition, and then we go da 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 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you agree with this, and then see what the other person comes up with. So, and the funny thing is, the synonyms are intelligent, reasonable, thinking, wise, judicious, enlightened, sane, balanced, normal. So it's always the same thing. Anyway,
all of
let's
those
have
are
this
in
thing
the eye of the
on
beholder,
rational.
isn't it? Yeah, let's see. I mean, we're halfway through here, so we might actually finish, before it's even 10 o'clock, or we might not. Depends how many other silly claims are made in the next 16 minutes odd. But if we do finish early, then we can talk about that as well. And obviously, I'd be interested to hear what Mustafa has to say as well. So let's see how we get on here. But yeah, I think it is useful because for me, I'm definitely looking for something that wouldn't be a subjective point of view. And I think something like, a contradiction is not a subjective claim. It's either a contradiction or it's not. Somebody being intelligent, you could say somebody's intelligent, I might not, and we'd have different criteria for that. So then you have to go into what are those criteria? Can we agree? And all of those other words that you mentioned there, most of them at least as I heard them, are the same. We're going to go, okay, well, wise. Well, who decides what wise is? Whereas that question doesn't come up with a contradiction. It's not a case of let's see if there's an agreement on this. A contradiction is a straightforward thing that doesn't admit of somebody's opinion. It is, it doesn't require somebody's opinion on whether it's a contradiction. Same with mathematics, I guess, that sort of thing. As close as we could get.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we've got time and we can go through some of those if we finish in time here. And you give us your thoughts as well, Mustafa, as and when. So just hit say stop or jump in. Yeah.
Cognitive faculties which are ordered in a particular way to allow us to come to conclusions and to understand truth. How human beings exercise these abilities will be different, right? For example, you and me hold two different positions. We use the same type of cognitive faculties, but we have two different worldviews.
No.
The same way many other people use it in many other ways. We can discuss that point. We touched upon the problem of evil, the last discussion we had as well. But what I want to go to first, and the video's there so they can go and watch that video online.
Sure,
but what I want to touch upon first is, what I was asking you is that the atheists would come to the Muslim and say, give me evidence for God's existence, right? But that assumes a few things. Number one, it assumes that science is the only way to truth. If they want physical evidence, tangible evidence.
No, it doesn't.
No, he's using the argument out of ignorance. He's trying to use reverse the argument out of ignorance in such a way that it's making it sound irrational to even question their crap. But when we say demand evidence, like we want something measurable, something observable, something to calculate. You guys were going to say something?
Yeah, you go ahead first if you like, Stops.
No, I just wanted. I just objected because it's false what he's saying.
Yeah, I agree. It's science is not the only way. That's not when an atheist says evidence, the Muslim or the theist would say, well, what evidence are you looking for? And then the person can say. But I think I think most people would agree that scientific or empirical evidence is the most persuasive, because if it's not that, I mean, you could have a priori quote unquote evidence, i.e., just knowledge without sort of having a prior justification, if you like, but that also presupposes certain things about reality, causal chains, etc., etc. But I think most lay people, at least, if not most lay people, just most people in general, would find empirical / evidence that would fall under the scientific purview the most persuasive, because arguments are what they are. And there might be some people who are persuaded, but I think certainly it's probably the most persuasive. So, but I suppose that's what he's thinking is, hey, I've spoken to all these people and what they're looking for is empirical evidence. And sure, I think most people would look for that, but it's certainly not the only way. You could provide other evidence, but I think most people are more persuaded by some sort of empirical evidence. And indeed, you've got a book that's supposed to have been authored or, dictated from this entity. And that is a book in this world. So obviously the entity has interacted in such a way as to bring forward its thoughts or ideas or commands in some format in this world. And that to me is empirical evidence, right? Here you have a book that makes claims about the world, and that's been communicated via a certain method, which is dubious to say the least. And so that's all we need, is to compare that with reality and set expectations and go, hey, is this what we'd expect from a sort of a God who wants to send a clear, concise, complete and error-free message to all people in all time, in all languages? Is this the best way to accomplish that? Because that's what it says in the book. at least in a number of places, right? And so we can generate an expectation based on that. And so I think, that would be, for me, the way to go. But science isn't the only way. I don't know. What do you think, Mustafa?
And yes, so evidence itself, in legal terms at least, and because I'm a student of law too, evidence has to be relevant, and it has to be material, and it has to, what do you call it? And evidence can also be circumstantial as well. It doesn't have to be, a direct evidence. It can be circumstantial evidence. So there are different kinds of evidence, and there's even hearsay evidence as well. And it can be ruled out, or it could be relevant depending on the circumstance. So evidence is you just have to be very careful of what kind of evidence you're looking for, that is. So, yes?
The thing is that you cannot use a hammer to clean a window. So if I go back a couple of 100 years, then there used to be a god of lightning, god of thunder, god of waves, god of wind, god of clouds, things like that. Yeah. Then we found out, well, we don't really need gods for that. So it was pushed back. Then it remained as the god of the life giver, the universe creator. Then we found out, well, we have pretty good ideas. Then it was pushed back even more. So now the gods are being pushed out of the universe. And if they are outside of the universe, you cannot use science anymore, because science is just like the hammer is only useful for one thing, not for cleaning windows. You cannot take science now to go and scrutinize or detect or evaluate something that is outside of the universe, because it's not part of nature. So the whole thing sort of, crashes down if you really think about what you are saying. And I don't know why he doesn't understand that there are limits for the tools that you are using, and that you cannot be absolute with everything that you are, coming across or hearing or saying or whatever. There are nuances in everything, and everything is relative. You just need to understand this. I don't understand why he's not doing that.
And stops
presumably
you.
That. Oh, go on.
Sorry, stops you. You brought an interesting point where, God was, there were local gods, and then there was the gods of the skies, and then the gods of the planets, and then, they kept pushing back further and further. So that is a very interesting, historically, if you look at it, then, the gods seem to just reduce and reduce, and now have been permanently pushed out of the universe. So yeah, that's a very good observation.
Yeah, but this is why science can no longer detect them.
Yeah.
I think presumably, Stops, you'd agree that if the supernatural interferes in this world, then that is a scientific, principle, that's a scientific endeavor, right? As you come upon, if we use the normal analogy, come upon a murder scene, we can infer that a murder has happened because there's certain evidence. Same thing here. If the claim is that something supernatural has happened, then there would be evidence that point that way. Let's say it's the resurrection of Christ, or the flying of a donkey, or indeed this miraculous Quran that came into being. Those are, in a sense, scientific claims. They claims about empirical reality, and in that sense, science in principle, at least, if not in practice, certainly in principle, it can investigate. So I agree with the point that it can't investigate the supernatural, because its realm is the natural, but it certainly can investigate the effects of a claimed supernatural, especially if it violates the laws of physics or our understanding of the natural world. Then science can be brought to bear there.
And as soon as you start doing that, it fails. This is the whole point. As soon as you start looking at these claims in the Quran, which can be handled by a scientific, process, then they fail. And that's exactly it.
Number two, it assumes that God is a part of the physical reality, or is physical himself. Right? Both of these things are true.
Who claims that? Maybe the Christians do, although again the whole Trinity thing is so vague and not easy to understand, and most Christians don't. And the sophisticated ones go to great lengths to try and explain the Trinity, and you just look at it and it doesn't make a lot of sense, no matter how well they try. But most atheists and most people don't think that God is at least Muslims don't. And if you're speaking to a Muslim, you understand that they don't think God is part of the physical reality, but they will accept that God has interfered in the physical reality, and that's the only thing we need. So no, I don't think that claim is correct either. Most people don't think God is part of the physical reality.
Right. For example, we know science is a method that we use. Right? For example, I believe it's Bertrand Russell who said, science is an attempt to discover by means of observation and reasoning based upon it particular facts about the world. So what he was saying is that science tries to using the method of science, you observe physical reality, and then you reason upon it. Again, going back to the point of reason, which is integral to the scientific method. And then you try to understand the physical world around you. That's what science tries to do. It can't tell you about moral truths. It can't tell you about metaphysical realities. It can't tell you about even mathematics, for example, some mathematical truths, although it uses these things. Yeah. So the point is, science can't tell you all truth. And when it comes to God, God is a metaphysical reality. God is beyond the physical. In Islam, we believe God is a creator of everything, and He's distinct and disjoint from His creation. He's not part of His physical creation. And that concept is quite intuitive as well to the human being. Purely from a rational perspective. I mean, if I was to ask you, does it...
No, I disagree. I don't think it's the most intuitive answer. If you think God was all there was, and this universe came into existence, then this universe being a separate material entity from God, I think the most intuitive and rational position is that it is in fact a part of God that has been, if you like, transformed. The idea that it would be separate, from where could the material possibly have come if God was all there was? By definition, anything that is material, even immaterial, whatever God consists of, is all there was. And so to say, well, I plucked this universe out of something else would be incoherent in my view. So no, I don't think that's the most rational position. I think it's the exact opposite. That's just my view. But I presented a reason why, right? And he hasn't been challenged on this here. If I was listening to him, I'd go, why do you think that's the most rational position? And then I'd present my reason as to why I think the opposite is more rational, like I have now.
Does it make sense that if there is an all-powerful creator, he is not going to be a part of his created physical creation? It makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. I would say it makes sense because it's a part of our very nature. Right?
Well, I mean, if he's all powerful, then there's no reason to suggest that he can't be part of this. And everything that exists is God. And if everything that exists is the universe plus God, then it would make sense that God is part of the universe. So no, I don't think that's necessarily the case. But again, he's appealing to intuition, but he's not really making an argument. Again, he's saying to this guy, hey, does this make sense? And don't fall for that when Muslims say that. Just ask them for the argument, because they're appealing to your intuition, which means that they can make claims and, again, not have to justify them. So even if it makes sense, go, hang on a moment, what's your argument for that? Even if you think that it makes sense, get them to present an argument, because they're so used to not having to do that. And it makes them lazy, and for us, it allows us to just let them get away with it.
Yeah, I like Imran's comment. Thinking clear in this comment, it says Imran looks like he's summoning his best argument.
Yeah, but he's not.
Yeah, well, if this is the best he's got, it's pretty pitiful. Hopefully he can do better. We'll see.
To tell you, no, God is a man who is about 6'5", has beard this length and eyes like this. There you go. Your expression says it. Yeah. It's very counterintuitive, right? Sure. From a rational, emotional, intellectual, innate perspective, right? So what we say is that the concept
we can just ask you why.
That's exactly what's happening. This anthropomorphizing this God is something that we see in all these the Abrahamic gods, at least. I don't know about the other gods. I don't know about other gods. But here we see this all the time. Of course, God has shins and hands and lips and everything that you have. I heard a very, very good argument the other day. And that is, if you take the elements of a human being, in other words, that he's wise, he can learn things, he can create things, he can be merciful. All you're doing is you're taking all these human attributes and just putting all in front of it. So he's all wise, all merciful, all this, all that. That's the only difference. Otherwise, it is all something these are human attributes. So all you're doing is anthropomorphizing this God who is just another version of a human being, just more everything, and that's it.
But it's also worse than that, Stops, because when you add the word all or most, which I think is synonymous, then it can also entail a contradiction. So you've got to be careful. Exactly. If you say all merciful and all just, then that can entail a contradiction. So it's all very well putting the word all or most in front, which would mean the maximum possible. But then you've got to be careful you don't run into contradictions, which again I think straightforwardly those sort of properties do conflict with each other.
Yeah.
There's another point. The concept of God in Islam makes sense and it's in line with the human nature. And it fits like a well-tailored suit. We'll discuss these points after.
My question again is, how's it in line with human nature? What's the argument for that? And he might come back and say, well, because it's so intuitive to think there's only one God. And then the question is again, well, why is that the case? right? And then he might make another assertion. You just keep questioning it, because somebody like this doesn't really have an argument, right? He's not somebody who's got an argument. Maybe Tortoise might have borrowed an argument here and there, but this guy, I don't think is well enough read or has enough of an understanding to actually present an argument that we can then look at and critique and either agree with or not, right? He will just make another assertion. You ask why that's the case, and it's another assertion ad infinitum with this sort of guy. Other more sophisticated people go, okay, here's my argument for X. Here's my premises and conclusion. Great. Now we can have a discussion on that. That's often what I'm looking for. And you can tell whether you're speaking to a sophisticated interlocutor, because they will be able to do that. Whether it's straightforward premises and conclusion, or whether, the argument is in a more informal way, that's where you can pick out the more sophisticated interlocutors from the less sophisticated, it seems to me.
Sort of stringing one claim after the other. Rob, just for your information, because TDS Dave says, can we turn up the video audio? And I said, no. For some reason, it's always on the low side. I don't know why it is that way, but we can't jack it up.
Apologize now. Here we are. I'm trying to, you might see me doing it here. That's maximum. There's no way to unfortunately raise it in...
StreamYard.
What do you call it? StreamYard. I wish they could. Other programs can do it. Had I known this, I could have tried to route it through another program and then have that program runs the audio, but that can be a bit tricky. So sadly not, I apologize. And the audio is not, they've got a mic down the bottom here. You might not be able to see it, but it's better if they've got, lapel mics on, because then you can hear them a lot better. So that's just, sadly, you just get this background noise in Speaker's Corner if they're not mic'd up with a mic very close to their mouth.
Being that in a sense, so the point is, God is not physical. Okay. Therefore, when it comes to the existence of God, we don't engage, and we shouldn't engage in trying to prove God through physical means. Now, when it comes to logical, rational argument,
wait, hang on. Yeah. Sorry. No. Sorry, Rob. You go ahead first.
No, you go first. Go ahead.
No, he actually puts a very negative word, saying that you can't try to, we shouldn't. So why shouldn't we try to, prove a God's existence, through these means? Why can't we try to experiment with that? So, you have to be very careful. Yeah.
And he'll say, because God is outside of, the scientific preview. But then all we have to ask is, well, has he interacted in this world? And if he has, are those effects in principle, investigable? Can we investigate that via the scientific method? And the obvious answer is yes, in principle. Whether we can do it in practice is a different story, but in principle, yes. So you cannot get out of this idea of empirical evidence if God has interacted. Now, if it was a deist God, then the argument would hold. If somebody says, hey, I'm a deist, and I believe God has not interacted in this world, has simply created it, and even that, in principle, potentially could be investigated by science, but that's the closest I think you could come. Or a God that that has just existed alongside the universe but has never interacted. Well, then for sure, then science has got nothing to say on that sort of a God. But as soon as it's a personal God that has interacted in this world, in those interactions, not the God itself, but the effects. Thank you very much. The effects of this interaction by this being are investigatable.
Limitation. Right? Are there arguments for God's existence? I would argue there's many arguments for God's existence. Very strong arguments for God's existence. Some of these arguments
Okay, so there we go. Okay, what's your strongest argument and why do you think so? Right? That's what we need to do here. There's all these arguments and he thinks there's very strong ones. What's the strong one that you think is most likely to convince a non-believer? Maybe that's another way to put it. Because he might have a whole range in his mind that he thinks are good, but now you've got to pick out one that you think a non-believer might find persuasive, and that I think is the, at least for me, a way to phrase the question, to try and get from them the one they think is most likely to persuade somebody else, not them, because they're already persuaded, but to persuade somebody else.
God shares with us in the Quran. I'll share one with you today as well. But however, the belief, we need to realize that belief first starts from a foundational perspective. Right? So in our philosophy, in our tradition, belief is not something that's acquired from the outside. The roots of belief are within the human nature. Right? So we believe God placed the belief in him, or aspects of the belief in him, within the human soul, within the soul. Now, what's proof of this?
Okay, so this idea that God placed the belief inside you. Well, again, if you ask a small child, right, you need rational faculties to form beliefs, at least beliefs that you can articulate. Now, children will have a priori beliefs to some degree, but I don't think there's any evidence that children have an a priori belief about a God. Now, they, of course, want to point to these failed studies of, Oxford and so forth, and Stops and I have dealt with that many, many times. So a child will have a belief about the world. They won't be able to articulate it in any way, and they won't be able to rationalize it, but they'll have a belief about, that light is hitting their eyes, or that they're hungry, or whatever the case is. They won't be able to say anything about it. But this particular belief he's making a claim about, just give me the evidence that any child has got that. And how do you show that that's the case? Good luck with that.
And Rob, what's interesting that you brought that up is that there's a Muslim myth. It's very common in the Islamic world that everyone is born a Muslim. So I think he's actually running with that assumption.
Of course, yeah, no, he is. But he believes everybody's got the fitra, right? So that's what they want to come back to. But again, we just got to ask ourselves, Mustafa, what are the expectations that would be generated if that were the case? Right, and here's the expectation I would have, is that everybody would believe that there's one God and the last messenger was somebody that came about 1400 years ago in the Middle East area of the world. Now, if all the different human tribes around the world had that sort of idea and they painted it on the caves, or there'd be some idea of that, then I'd be going, okay, wow, that is evidence in favor of this fitra claim. What would be evidence against that? Well, you've got people who believe all kinds of things, and almost nowhere else outside of the Middle East do they believe that specific claim. To me, that's evidence against this fitra claim. And then, of course, we've got the people like the Piraha of Amazon who have never had a belief in a supernatural entity. And for me, that's a refutation, not a rebuttal. That's not just a point, like an argument against, but it's a refutation, i.e. we can now throw out this claim of the fitra, because here we have a tribe that was untouched by other humans, and they've never had a belief in a supernatural entity. They've had a belief in spirits, and they've had a belief in Mother Earth, but that is in no way equatable, unless you're the most dishonest Muslim in the world, to a supernatural divine entity that is brought this universe into existence.
Yeah,
and this also means that thinking clearly just brought this up. It's actually worse, like 90% ex-Muslims on this planet, which it means that 90% of the population on this planet are not convinced that Islam is the answer. Why I am using 90% is that the official count is 80%, but the unofficial one is 90%, because a lot of Muslims are not actually Muslims. I don't know if people are aware of this poll. This is not a Pew calculation or a projection or something. This is an actual count where they called like over 50,000 people and asked them, what is your stance on Islam? How many times do you pray? What is your approach to Sharia and things like that? And we found out that I think it was 64% of the population that they called in the Islamic Republic of Iran who no longer pray 5 times a day. And it's even worse, it was 69% who reject Sharia, who say that the country should not be based on Islam. It should be secular. And this is a real poll in the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is why I'm saying it's actually a lot worse for Islam than people are making out with this 80%. A lot worse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think the fitra claim is something that I feel has been refuted. So we don't take that particularly seriously.
You are. It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy. I've done this so many times, and people will still do it. I've done it with this Asadullah.
Yes, Asadullah. That guy. Crap. Yeah, Kevin. I forgot his name.
His name is Kevin, and he calls himself something from Andalusia or something. And I've done this with him. I've done this with Sources. I've done this with so many people, with so many times. I've looked at all these claims by Justin Barrett and by this Petrovich woman, and I've shown over and over, and also this Pinaha, this group in the Amazon. I've brought all these arguments forward, and they still will not accepted, they will still go and propagate the fitra. I don't know what it takes. How many times you have to shove their faces into the facts, into reality before they say, "Oh, really?" But you can't. It's impossible to just do it like 5 or 6 times. It's not enough. They will just continue down their road. They will not accept it.
Yeah, and thinking clearly, yeah. Sorry, just give it. Yeah, thinking clearly. Does that mean Shia Muslims are smarter than Sunnis, given that was in Iran? I'm like, I would, being an ex-Shia, I'm gonna say slightly smart.
Because the situation in other countries is not that different. This is the funny thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware of the numbers even in Saudi Arabia, and the home country of Islam. And even there, the number is so high. I mean, we see more and more photos of people standing outside the Kaaba and inside the Masjid al-Haram, the sacred place of Islam, with the sign "atheist" here and things like that. They're making a joke of this. And there are estimates now that over 30% of the Muslims in Saudi Arabia are not really Muslims. I know this. My colleagues, they were not worried about Islam. They didn't care about Islam. They were eating, they were drinking, they were going out partying with us. These were normal people. It's just on a Friday they had to go and pretend that they were Muslims, because otherwise it's backbiting, which you're not allowed to do in Islam, but they do it anyway. But in reality, a lot of the Muslims are not really Muslims. They are just Muslim by name. So,
yeah. Oh, I think we can continue with the video. Rob?
Okay. Yeah, sorry, you guys were having a great chat there, so I just popped to the loo quickly.
Oh, no, that's okay.
That is a toilet break time. All right, here we go.
thank you for not switching on the camera.
We can argue in two ways. What you have to do is look at world history, look at the world today. Not universally, but majority of the people on the face of this earth throughout history have always believed in the cause of creator and supreme being. Sure, right?
So what?
So that alludes to the fact that it's a part.
Well, they haven't believed in a single one, and again, we'd have to look at numbers to see whether they believed in a creator that's outside of this universe. So again, I think that's a claim that you'd have to substantiate. But who cares? Lots of people believe the earth.
Exactly.
The majority of people thought the earth was flat, or thought that gods were involved in bringing down thunder. Appealing to the ad populum is not a good argument in favor of your God being the case.
Part of human nature. It's built-in element of the human being itself.
But that doesn't make it accurate. But
No, but
yeah.
when the majority, for example, if I was to say to you, is it absolutely wrong to kill an innocent child?
Okay. Notice how he just goes on to another point, right? The other guy said, he tried to make an appeal to the majority there, and maybe he realized that was a dead end. And then suddenly he goes on to a moral argument now, right? He's now going to try and appeal to the majority again, as if somehow this should be impressive or persuasive to somebody, and of course it isn't.
Even as an atheist, you say absolutely yes, or you made support. Right?
Well,
Would you feel? Let's put what you think rational. Would you feel it's wrong?
Of course, I'd feel that way.
Did you hear that? I don't know. It may be a bit soft for you. Let's put aside, he said it very quickly, let's put aside rationality. Do you feel that it's wrong?
And
But when you hear something like this,
Mhm.
you know that this is a sophistry, extraordinary. Do you feel that's wrong? Well, how do you feel? You hear some statements, you make a rational justification, and you may have an emotional reaction. But ultimately, are we looking for an appeal to emotion, or are we looking for an appeal to rationality to make a decision on a rational proposition? Because he was the one talking about rationality, and now he's asking him to make an emotional decision. Right?
Yeah. And
These small things that is very easy to miss if you're not paying attention.
And I think, Rob, there's something I also caught on. When he mentioned the point of killing a child, I immediately remembered Banu Qurayza and their children. And I wanted to, if I were there, I would have thrown back at him. So your prophet killed little boys. So how
He's
is
going to
that?
respond and say, no, it wasn't little boys. They were deemed men, blah, 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 right? You can go down that route, of course. And we would agree with you, right? The fact that they had pubic hair doesn't mean that they're
Doesn't
men.
mean, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is interesting because I hear this in the background too. This Allahu Akbar. I thought it was Allahu Akbar. It's not. It's the snack bar is open. That's a very easy explanation.
Oh.
Yeah. Majority of the world will agree to us. Yeah. Not all. There's some crazy people, but most will agree.
Or some cultures that are not.
Yeah. So what we can say safely is that some of these principles of right and wrong are natural to the human being. It's a part of our nature. How we don't understand, but it's a part of our nature.
Sure. Okay.
But what he doesn't realize is that's an argument for our side of the fence, not his, right? Although he's going to think it is because, hey, God gave us this natural thing. But the atheist can also appeal to that and say, hey, there's an intuitive idea that wiping out children is not a good idea for the propagation of the species. And if evolution is part of our driving force to propagate our species, then killing off children is in conflict with that natural urge that we have. And so an atheist can also appeal to that. He can tell us, well, hey, God put it in us. And we can say, well, it's a byproduct of our survival and thriving and future survival of the human species. So again, this is not an argument in his favor that we can't also employ in our favor.
Okay, yeah.
In the same way, the belief in God we see throughout history is a part of human nature. So from the Islamic,
no, it's not a part of human nature. And you
What did
haven't
he say?
demonstrated that people believe it, and for it to be a part of, he said it's a part of human nature. Then you'd have to demonstrate that from birth, it was a part of nature. How do you possibly demonstrate that, right? And again, all you can appeal to is these flawed Oxford studies, which Stops and I have gone through many times and shown that they don't the result. And even the person who did the studies conceded that he wasn't claiming that it demonstrated a God. Right? Even he said so. But these guys obviously ignore all of this and try and make it the claim that young children as low as 4 or 5 believe in a God. And if you look at it, in fact, that's not even the conclusion that the researcher himself said. But this idea would need to be demonstrated. So at the moment, this is a completely unsubstantiated assertion. And oftentimes, we can dismiss until there's good evidence to believe unsubstantiated assertion. So that one, for me at least, is out of the door. That's just a vacuous claim.
Yeah, all you need to show is what children do is they have this teleological approach. In other words, this useful thing that a stone is there so that you can kick it or sit on it, or a tree is there so that a bird can sit on it. So this is the kind of a thinking that a child has. And if you're then, what then happened is they did a study and they said, well, let's separate the children by whether they have been indoctrinated or not. And then the children that were not indoctrinated did not easily refer or come up with the idea that a God could have done this. But the ones who were indoctrinated by some or other God did actually believe that they came to the conclusion that there is some sort of a supernatural entity that looks after these things, that takes care of the birds and puts the tree there so that the bird can sit on it to rest on its way north or south or something. Whereas the children without didn't have that. So it's been taken. It's a shut and close case. I don't understand why they even discuss this still.
Islamic tradition, it sort of complements this, because in Islam we're told of the fitra. For example, the Prophet Muhammad peace be upon him said that every child is born on the fitra, it's pure nature. We know in the Quran God says turn towards that pure nature, that fitra that God created. The word is fitra, the pure nature, the essence. From a Western philosophical perspective, and you've already appreciated this is fine, we don't have to go here. But if you were to go to the Western philosophical tradition, you can almost see it as the foundational, self-evident truth, a basic belief, right? Just like the real world is real for science. Okay? So that's where belief begins for the Muslims, right? And I think it's a very strong position to hold, because we're not.
Okay, well, you said it's a strong position. You haven't provided an argument for that. You've made the assertion that this is the case and then claimed that it's strong. Sure, it's strong from your point of view. You just don't have anything to substantiate it. And again, if you're somebody who understands this, and again, most often, unfortunately, right, as we see here, I mean, the guy on the left is asking some questions, but most often these Muslim apologists get away with it because they end up lecturing to the other person. They've got a few things in their mind. They've got a well-rehearsed script, and they get to lecture. They almost preach to the other person, right? And, Stops and I, or Mustafa, or any of you guys who are watching, were in the park. He wouldn't get this far, right? He'd be stuck way back at the beginning over here at minute 2.5, trying to justify his claim there, right? But fortunately, they get much more free reign there because most people aren't, they aren't, and by no means am I a black belt or anything, but they aren't more honed in as we've become and are continuing to become more of in these ideas, only because we focused on this and taken time to do it. Otherwise, we'd be as lay as the rest of the people out there and just, blindly go along with this or nod along or not know what to say or when to jump in or whatever the case is.
We're not straight away going to this logical discourse and realm, which we can. I will share some of that too.
Sure, yeah.
But what you can appreciate is that God has given us many layers or many different angles that lead us to Him. So there's that foundational aspect, then there's revelation, then there's the engagement of the rational intellect as well. Right? Now, we okay to move on to the rational?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I'll give you one.
I wouldn't let him go on to the rational.
Oh, yeah.
Don't let him go on to the rational, right? You made a claim that there's revelation. How do you know that that revelation came from God and wasn't man-made? What expectations would be generated if it were the case that this came from God? Right? And then you can go off on that. And right, the revelation can only, for him, come from God. Right? He's not going to believe, and he's not going to accept unless he's some sort of fringe idea that God has communicated with him directly. So what's the revelation? It's the Quran, right? And if he's listened to some of the Christian precepts, he might say natural revelation. Hey, I look out at the world and this is all a revelation. This can only have come from God. And I asked this recently of Christians, right? I said to them, here's the question, right? And I've never heard a response to this. I say to them, what would nature need to look like such that you would accept that it is not a revelation from God? And at that point, and then somebody else rephrased it, because to me that seems straightforward, but somebody else rephrased and said, what would a not God, a natural world look like, right? That's another way you could phrase it, I guess. And the response, and I can hear there's a response of silence for a few noticeable seconds, even with the people that are quite, honed in their skill. Just ask them, what would a not God world or, nature look like if it was not a revelation from God? And now the brain's got to think. And actually it turns out that they don't have anything, because anything they say to you, well, you could just say to them, well, hang on a moment, how did you establish that isn't a revelation from God? So it turns out that natural revelation, the things that you look out there, there's no way to establish that it couldn't be the case, in which case it's an unfalsifiable claim. And that in and of itself should give them pause. Right? And as soon as you have a claim where you can't establish whether it's in fact the case, then either you're taking it on faith, or it should lower your conviction that it is in fact the case. But of course, they don't think like that. And so I think for me, we can immediately get rid of natural revelation, unless they could show what some sort of non-God revelation that's natural would look like. Otherwise, we can get rid of that. So all we're left with is the Quran with him, right? That's his revelation. And that's where they're weakest, and that's where Stops and I focus most of our attention, for good reason.
One thing, Rob, there's one thing I want to mention, though, in favor, because I'm always in awe, because they're using 3 cameras here. So the camera positions here, I must say they are exceptionally well positioned. They have switched off all the automatic functions. It's on manual control, so you don't see this wavering that you see when it's on automatic. So in so many Muslim videos, and I like the cinematography when they go to the focus on the faces, that the background is nicely blurred and things like that. So the value, the way that this is made is a fucking amazingly well produced video. It's just a pity that the contents is so poor. This is a pity. The other thing I want to point out is that the guy on the left, the atheist, agnostic, or whatever he may be, they love showing videos of a passive person, somebody who is not asking many questions, somebody where he can just rattle off and go and on and on and on and on, and nobody interrupts them. Nobody questions you, but hang on, what are you trying to tell me? None of that happens. So they love these passive people in their videos.
Yeah, and I agree. Look, they've got 3 cameras. That's well done. Although I'm quite critical of videos, because I've done a bit of that. It's way overexposed, so you can see all the white areas there. If you did this properly,
that's the point.
You do something called underexpose, and you expose for the skin tones as well. And so if you look on Imran's face, he's way overexposed. So these are not professionals in any sense, but yes, they've got 3 cameras, and you're right. If you've got 3 DSLR type cameras, then you will get that effect of blurring out the background. It's just a shame that they can't get the color and the exposure right. And that tells me that they are amateurs. The professionals, I would immediately be able to tell you. So somebody like, what's his name, was far more professional, right? What was
Leon.
that guy's name? That was Leon, right? Leon from what that channel was. what was his channel, right? I can't think of the name now. I'm sure the guys in the chat will tell us. But you could see with his one, right? He was much more professionalist. In fact, he went on, I think, to start do more professional things as well.
Second chapter of the Quran, verse 35 and 36.
See on the left side of the face there, that's way overexposed, right? You'd expose that what looks like our left side
Content
of the face.
over everything.
Right. Content over everything. Thank you very much. Yeah. Now he wouldn't have made this mistake, right? They're just way overexposed. As long as you're there with the camera and you're watching what's going on. If you set it on manual and the sun changes, well, then of course you will get that effect. So it's difficult when you're shooting videos outdoors.
Thank you, TTS Dave.
God says, were they created by nothing? Or were they the creators of themselves? Or did they create the heavens and the earth? Heavens and the earth. Rather, they are not certain. Now, when we look at these verses, there are some logical implications. There are some logical possibilities. Can something come from nothing?
Okay, let him finish this.
Something make itself? Or can something be made by something else made? These are the things that I pointed out.
Can something be made by something else made? Well, of course, something can be made from something else made. Right now, so now he's going to go down the idea of, hey, you can only have this one option. Can something come from nothing? Well, it depends what you mean by nothing. And if you go with the Muslim definition of nothing, well, I think that's a conceptual idea that I see no reason to believe exists in any way in reality. And that's a problem for the Muslim because, of course, in the Quran, it says that God created this universe from nothing. Kun vayakun, be and it was from nothing. And they take that to mean that it came from nothing. So that's problematic for these guys. But it depends what you mean by nothing from a naturalist point of view. But let's see, because he's going to go through all three of them, and I think we can critique each one of them separately.
And there's a fourth one that's unstated. We'll touch upon that later. So let's work through these rationally now. Let's engage in this. Can something come from nothing? Let's take the universe. Could the universe come from nothing?
Well, I mean, I would say almost nothing, but it's not nothing.
There has to be something.
Yeah.
Because even as an atheist, you would agree.
Almost nothing is something. So yeah.
Exactly. There's nothing.
Now, number one, an atheist does not know what nothing is. There are three different types of nothing that we know of. So you have the philosophical, the layman, and the cosmological nothing, all different types of nothing. The third thing, well, first is the atheist doesn't have an opinion. The second thing is there are different ones. And the third thing is the only one who thinks something comes out of nothing is the Muslim, because that's what it says in the Quran several times. So get lost.
Yeah, and so to deny the atheist that, but they think it comes from the conceptual or the philosophical, absolute nothing, and that's I would suggest impossible if you think God was all there was, because if there was a conceptual nothing, i.e., something that was not God, then that would have had to exist alongside God, and then then God is not all there was. So I think there's lots of problems with that view. But this idea, whenever I'm asked this question, I always ask them, well, what do you mean by nothing? And then we have to rule out the conceptual nothing. And then if we have some other version of a nothing, well, then if you take a Lawrence Krauss version of a nothing, which is the absence of time, space, matter, and energy, then yes, something can come from that. But they don't accept that as nothing. But what they do accept as nothing, I think, is simply a conceptual idea. And I don't think there's any reason to believe it exists in reality. So at that point, we're at an impasse. What do we do now? And so, but again, this guy's fairly close. He's saying, well, it's almost nothing, but not quite, or whatever the case is. But I don't think that's necessarily
most reasonable. Yeah.
Nothing by itself has no potential. Nothing itself is nothing. Although in Islam, what we say, God is the only being that has the ability and how to create from nothing.
There you go. Right.
All of a sudden.
There you go. And then the argument is, well, can you provide an argument for that? But I wouldn't even ask him how you provide an argument. I would ask the other way around. I'd say, was God all there was, and there was nothing else? Okay. And if you're saying God was all there was, then by definition, how can you create from nothing? Because all you can create from is God. God can create from himself. There's nothing else he can create from by your own definition. So I'd ask the question slightly differently than that. And then see how he responds. And I've done this with hijab, and there's a video on my site, and he sort of babbled some incoherent nonsense. So I don't know. And then I use the fishbowl analogy to try and help them, because Muslims are they find, and Stops taught me this, right, years ago. Muslims find it very difficult to conceptualize things, because all they've been taught is what to say and not how to think. And so the conceptual nature of a Muslim's minds, at least in our anecdotal experience, is very poor. So you now have to construct some kind of analogy to try and help them understand what you're referring to, because it's very two-dimensional for them.
He's the one that can do it, right? So from nothing comes. Can something create itself? Think about this one.
Well, that's an interesting question. It depends what you mean by something. And again, one could have a philosophical discussion, or perhaps even a metaphysical, or even some sort of scientific discussion about that. Is it possible something to create itself? Well, it depends on how you define something and what you consider creating itself. It's potentially an interesting question. But for him, and possibly the guy on the left, because I don't remember, intuitively it sounds like, no, well, that can't be the case. But I think under investigation, it's certainly an interesting question. It's not something that one can dismiss immediately, because we have to ask, what do you mean by something, and why would I accept that? So, yeah, it's an interesting question potentially.
What I have done is I've looked at different, because this came up with the inimitability claim. I said, well, yes, you can. Because if you take a clone, implant it into the womb of a woman, then the woman is giving birth to herself, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think that's where the law of identity would come in, and there might be an issue there. But just thinking about it, the Gott and Lee model of the universe, right, which is the universe creating itself. I've literally got it here somewhere. I could actually put it on screen, or at least quote from it.
That's another one, exactly.
That's a universe creating itself, right? And so when you say that, I mean, I could always bring that up as an example. Yeah, it's called the Gott and Lee model here, and there's an interesting, it looks like a funnel. Maybe if I can bring up the...
Well, it's just a loop. It's a time loop.
Yeah.
And then it's got which is the creation point of different universes with different parameters. So what Professor Gott has done is he said, theoretically, if you take something that has not existed before, it can create itself out of the time loop and even create the multiverse. And he's shown that this is a theoretical possibility. He doesn't say that it's rational. He doesn't say that it's possible. He doesn't say anything. It's just a thought experiment where you can do this. So
yeah, well, he says it's entirely possible. Well, entirely possible. I'm not sure what the difference is there, but it's possible. It's not impossible, and hasn't been ruled out by any of the laws of physics or quantum mechanics, because he's an expert in general relativity, and Lee, his compatriot in China, is an expert in quantum mechanics, and so they've produced a model. I've put the link in the chat. That there you can download the PDF, and it basically says that in general relativity there's nothing that prohibits closed timeline loops, and if that happens, then essentially you could have a universe itself, right? Very counterintuitive to us lay people, but then these ideas are very counterintuitive, and I think bringing intuition to these very complex, difficult to understand ideas is not the way to go. So, but there's a model. Now, of course, if somebody in the chat or anybody else thinks that they've got a defeater to that, then by all means let Professor Gott know, and I'm sure he'd be interested.
And this is quite interesting.
I'll give you the answer.
The reanimator is saying you shouldn't forget it's their job. They get paid very well. I doubt they believe in it themselves. Well, it's an interesting concept. Do they actually believe what they are propagating? Because it's their job, they get money for it, so they would be silly not to do that, because if they stop doing that, then they wouldn't have the income that they're getting. But I'm not actually so sure that they don't believe this. I think there is really this kernel of belief that there is something, that what they are doing is actually for some benefit. I don't think it's only for themselves. I don't think it's only for the money. I think they are in it for some spiritual, for the want of a better word, reason that they think there really is something to it. So, yeah, I've also thought about this, but I've never really said it must be like that.
Well, again, Stops, you have to remember, if you convert someone to Islam, you get more blessings and you have a closer edge on heaven.
Exactly, and more points, because at the end of the day, every Muslim collects points, and the more points you get, the less time you wait to get into heaven, and the higher level you get, the closer you are to God. So it's a very sort of self-centered approach. I think it's like a pyramid scheme, actually, because remember that the guys that you convert, their good deeds contribute to your points, and therefore you then get closer to God. So it's a very selfish scheme that they have there.
it's enjoyable to go through this process yourself. So.
Right. Yeah. Well,
There's something special about the Quran that God he engages with the human intellect and he lets us take those steps, rational steps, to come to the conclusions. So can something create itself?
well, no, I can't create myself.
Could the universe create itself?
There you
fuck
asked the
should we
question,
know?
right? And we've just suggested that it's entirely possible that can be the case, and there's a model out there. So if you're ever confronted with that question, if you're a viewer, just remember the Gott and Lee model. Google it, you'll see that's what they're talking about there, and so it's entirely possible. Are we claiming that it has happened or it's a fact of the matter? No, but he asked, can it happen? In other words, is it logically possible? And at this stage, there's nothing to rule that out.
Well, if I can't create myself, then I guess the universe.
Because you understand.
Yeah, but that's a bad inference, right? Because you can't create yourself. That's an equivocation fallacy. That doesn't mean that the universe can't create itself. And like we say, don't use your intuition with something that's deeply counterintuitive. General relativity is extremely counterintuitive. The idea that there is no absolute point of reference, everything is relative, is just not something that is intuitive to human beings at all. So we definitely don't want to make those sort of claims.
The very basic logical principle there, which is that to create yourself, you have to already exist. And if you already exist, then you're not creating yourself, you're already there. So it's a paradox. So not only, if you see the first option from nothing, it's impossible. But this one is not only impossible, but it's a logical contradiction. It's beyond impossible, right?
Well, I'm sure Richard Gott would love to hear that from you. So by all means, Imran, do send a peer-reviewed paper in and suggest to him that the universe creating itself is a paradox. I'm sure he will be fascinated with the mathematics and the logical reasoning that you produce. But I don't think that your claim here, an appeal to intuition and the lack of an argument, is going to be persuasive to him or indeed to any of us lay people either. But I'm sure it sounds good to your ear and the Muslims who are listening.
Then the next option, can something created create something else? So for example, God says, were they the ones that created the heavens and the earth? Can something created create something else?
Well, the obvious answer is yes. Of course, something created can create something else. I mean, what a ridiculously stupid question to ask. If you ask, can something that's created create something that is beyond its capability of creation, well, then trivially no, but that would be a stupid question to ask anyway. So, but notice here, the question that he asked, the obvious and straightforward answer is yes, right? But that's not the question that the Quran actually asked. Could they have created the universe? And that is, straightforwardly, seemingly, intuitively, no, we can't create the universe, but we can certainly create something else, obviously.
And you see, this is the problem.
Well, I mean, my father
Because as soon as you go into these discussions, a Muslim will automatically ask you, well, can you create a fly? And then you have to admit, no, I cannot create a fly. And he thinks that this is the end. And it's not. This is the beginning, because now you must turn it around and say, well, neither can your God. And then he will say, yeah, but of course he created all flies. Well, I said, well, then show me. You expect me to show you how I can create a fly right here, now and then. And then you go and you just make a claim that your God can, but he has never created them. Yeah, but where do you think all flies come from? You see, and this is exactly the fallacy that we are getting into, that they think that this has any, and this is this word I hate, this explanatory power. It does not exist. These are just claims. And this is the funny thing, that they think, yeah, God has created them. Obviously, you can't, but there we go. God, you can see flies, and God has created them. That's presuppositionalism at its best. That's all it is.
Well,
And they are so proud of it.
So that's possible, right? Good. But the problem with this option is, if you look a bit deeper, then you can ask the question, well, what created that something that created that something? And they could keep going, but what created that something that created that something that created
Okay, so that's a shifting of the goalpost, right? He asked a specific question. The straightforward answer is yes. And now it's a subtle shifting of the goalpost. Okay, and instead of conceding, yes, you've given me an answer, they just ignore that and then ask a further question. And now when you become slightly better at this, you go, hang on a moment, we're not going to continue on. I want you to concede that I've answered that question. Now you are shifting to another question. Are you going to concede that I've given you a rational answer, and it's an answer that you are not seemingly going to challenge? Right. Fine. Now I've answered it. Now you want to shift. Why do you want to shift? Why did you ask that first question then, if there was a straightforward answer? And if they don't concede that, we're not moving on to, because now what he's getting to is an infinite regress. And now he's going to make the same old tired claim. Oh, well, you couldn't get to this moment of now. Listen here now.
And if you went on forever, an infinite chain of creators and causes, we wouldn't be here today.
What's the argument for that, please? That's an assertion that you haven't got. And when Muhammad Hijab was asked this by Jack Angstreich, who's far more knowledgeable on these topics, Hijab had nothing to say. He babbled some nonsense, and then his buddy Darren Hamza jumped in with a sniper analogy that was so disanalogous. It's not just that it was disanalogous, it wasn't even wrong. If you've heard that term before, it was so bad, it wasn't even wrong. Right? But you'd have to ask somebody like this, which nobody does, unfortunately. Immediately, I'm going to ask him, what's the argument for that? And now I guarantee what he'll do is make another assertion. Oh, well, if you wouldn't reach this moment of now because if you had a beginning this series of events, you wouldn't reach this moment of now. Why not? Right? Why not? And you keep pressing them until they provide you an argument, or you can just dismiss this. Right? But this is the tiled claim they make over and over, and they're just not challenged enough on this. Now I've got a good answer for this, because obviously I had an answer, but it's become even better because of Alex Malpass. And so, we could always talk about that maybe in Discord afterwards, because I thought we were going to finish by 10. We're nowhere near. We were doing so well, and now we've sort of gone off the rails a bit.
Right? Because you can't traverse the infinite. You probably come across the problem of the infinite regress, right?
I've heard about it.
Okay. For example, a simple analogy would be, this bus is there. Say I want to go home on the bus, but I don't have a pound. I need a pound to get on the bus. I say, my friend, give me a pound. Like, I'll give you a pound, no problem, because I'm a nice guy, but I don't have a pound, so I need to get a pound from someone behind me.
Okay, this is a complete misunderstanding of this argument. He's doing it arse about face, and this is just a complete misunderstanding. We haven't got time now. I could explain this, and I'd rather explain it to him so he doesn't make this glaringly stupid, mistaken analogy with asking for coins, because that's not how this argument actually works. He made the exact opposite claim about this, and now his analogy is backwards.
If that person said the same thing and that went on forever, would I ever get on the bus? Would that event ever take place? No. Right? So there has to be that first cause that gave the first pound in that example. The analogy is not perfect.
Yeah, there has to be a first cause.
No, the analogy is completely arse about face. Not just not perfect, it's completely and utterly disanalogous.
Yeah. So it breaks down the understanding that something created something else. So what's the fourth only possibility that's left? We've gone through all of the other three.
But there's a creator.
There's an uncaused cause. That's not true. Right? So that's the conclusion we come to ourselves just using our minds. I mean, can you think of any other possibility?
I don't.
Okay, so this is again shifting the burden of proof. Can you think of something else? No, we don't have to. You've made the claim that this is the only one. How? The question to ask him is, how did you establish that that is the only other option? And then he'll say what he said there. Can you think of something else? No. That's a shifting of the burden of proof. You said it was the only one. Can you provide me a rational argument that says that those are the only four options? No, you can't. Thank you very much.
I can't think of any other possibilities. I know where you're going with what you're saying, but I mean, I would say that I'm not really well versed in the actual science of it. I think for me, if I could kind of just.
Oh, now he just wants to use reasoning. Now, firstly, he wanted him to throw away reason and to feel about it, right? To come up with an emotional response. Now, suddenly, he wants him to reason when he shifted the burden over to the other guy. Yeah, this is just not being entirely intellectually charitable or honest here.
Slightly move the conversation a bit. I would say that the reason I became an atheist was not so much because of the science. It was more along the lines of that I didn't feel religion really addressed the issues that I had experienced as a person.
We talked about this last time, the personal experience.
Brilliant, excellent
because
stuff,
I don't think even
Sorry, you want to say something?
No, I just said excellent stuff. This is exactly this should be the statement. This is the best statement that you can make. Stop talking about science. Stop talking about that. Religion doesn't address it. The Quran doesn't address it. These are the reasons. That's it.
I don't think they really address the person as an individual. No, thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to going. Okay, we'll address those points quickly for you. Right? And like we said, we touched upon this briefly at the end last time. That's the personal thing that really matters. But before we go, can we at least acknowledge that from a rational, remember, it's not scientific argument that shared with you.
Yeah.
It's a very argument based on principles, logical principles, things that are intuitive and understandable. Can we at least appreciate that from based on that argument that there is only one conclusion, there has to be an uncaused cause before we move on? Okay, sure. Yeah.
I can see that.
Okay.
It's just.
What?
Okay, so they apparently got rid of 40 minutes because of the atheists. That's probably a good thing as well for us as well. But I think he was far too quick to concede that, right? And if he ever watches this video, if he thinks more about it, he doesn't need to concede that. The other guy would need to provide an argument. That's the only rational answer. And of course, some of the other possibilities we've gone through, they haven't been ruled out. He thinks he has with some assertions and an appeal to intuition. We're not going to grant that. But even if the other three were ruled out, it doesn't necessarily follow that the fourth option, that an uncreated creator created this universe, is the only other option. He would need to provide an argument that there are, in fact, no other options. Otherwise, it's an appeal to ignorance.
I know it's an emotional thing for you.
Yeah, because well, it's very emotional. That's one thing. Also, I
But if you don't
realize.
want this section shared, we won't put it out there. 'Cause I
Yeah,
know it's
maybe,
explosive.
maybe it's best.
But we can play now.
I think actually
wanna
we're probably
stop
getting
here,
to
yeah.
10 o'clock. So let's leave it there, I think. If you want to, we'll post the link to that video. I'll post you the link if you want to watch the last few moments. As I say, we were doing so well, and then it just became a bit longer for us. So there's the link if you want to watch the last few minutes. By all means, do that. But I think we've kind of, watched enough. So maybe you guys can summarize your views, and I'll give a final few words, and then Stops can bring us to a close.
Mustafa, why don't
So
you
thoughts,
start?
Mustafa,
Yes.
or Stops?
Yes, I was thinking like the title itself, I was waiting for the meaty part, I was waiting for that moment, like him going, aha, he admitted this, aha, he admitted that, but it's been a while, and I'm just waiting for it, and it's nothing substantial has been established. Like it's just a lot of word salad that I came across. And he was just being like very, he's using all these other concepts, but he hasn't exactly addressed Islam itself, like Islam as a philosophy or Islam as a, and nothing by an Islamic scholar at all. Like he's just, it hasn't even addressed the Quran, the Hadith, or even any of the Islamic texts itself. So, I'm finding it interesting that a lot of people, these preachers, are relying on alternative, other texts and other means besides the Quran, besides the Hadith, which I find very fascinating.
Well, yeah, because they're
Yep.
using Christian
Stops.
stuff. I mean, Justin Barrett is a Christian. He's now a lecturer at a seminary. So this is the highest level, I think, of Christian indoctrination and theology. So this is all that they have, because they don't have their own arguments. Islam doesn't have any arguments as such. They need to borrow from others. So all in all, I hope there are some Muslims watching this who are taking some value from this, who are realizing, oh my God, if you listen to it from a Muslim point of view, you are so convinced, you are so thinking, oh, this is true, and it makes so much sense, and yes, what he's saying, the one follows from the other, and things like that. But as soon as you start taking it apart, as soon as you apply critical thinking, it just vanishes. It just crumbles. And I'm hoping that people will see it like that. That we're not being, like stupid and silly and dogmatic and sophistry, sophistics, whatever, applying sophistry. I hope that people are seeing that we're not doing that. And I hope that they're seeing that the arguments being brought here are not real arguments. They're just claims which are very easy to knock down. And I'm hoping that people will see exactly this.
And what I've also noticed that, like you guys pointed out, that the other person was too passive. And Rob is correct. Like, you need to attack these, not necessarily attack, but hold them on to certain points. Okay, where did you establish that? Because I've noticed that the technique, and Rob also pointed it out, that it's very sneaky, that they just insert God very completely, skipping around and, just hop over and just put God there and pretend nothing happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway, as always, is these guys make a lot of claims, and instead of accepting it or responding back and saying, no, it's like, what's the argument for that? They just too often get away with it. So I think, obviously, there wasn't anything substantial from Imran, which is most often the case. But worse than that, he never actually provided an argument. It was simply assertions. And so I think that's the thing to hone in on. And also watch for the fallacies that come in, the shifting of the burden and that sort of stuff, and avoidance, diversionary tactics. Saying to the guy, let's put aside rationality. How do you feel about this? Right? These are just these are just laughable things that no sophisticated person would do, and it just shows the level of unsophistication of this particular guy.
Yeah, I'm also like glad that you guys brought out the definitions of nothing. Like you said, 3 definitions, 3 of them.
Yeah. I know of 3: philosophical, cosmological, and the layman.
Okay. And are there others? Are there other definitions of nothing? Oh, wow.
Probably yes. You need to go look at who was it? Tracy, I forgot her last name, of Atheist Experience. She's got like a 2-hour thing on nothing.
Oh, wow.
All right, Stops, you want to bring it to a close?
There we go. What we're going to do in the end is provide the Hadith of the week, which today says, I heard Allah's Messenger saying, if there was a river at the door of any one of you and he took a bath in it 5 times a day, would you notice any dirt on him? They said, not a trace of dirt would be left. So the Prophet added, that is the example of 5 prayers with which Allah blots out or annuls evil deeds.
Wait, what? What? Hang on. Hang on. Why are we not... Okay, we're doing this wudu, right? Where the wash is like 3 times, like, this body part 3 times. Why are we not washing it 5 times then, if that's the logic you're using?
No, but the thing is, if you wash yourself 5 times a day, there is no dirt left on you. So if you pray 5 times a day, there's no sin left on you.
But hang on, like you can still get dirty even if you wash something after.
This is the point. If you wash yourself so thoroughly, you can't get dirty. But the funny thing is, if you take the time to wash yourself 5 times a day, you don't have time to get dirty anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's so weird.
This is the thing. As soon as most Muslim analogies simply don't work, and this is one of them. So there you go.
Allah blots out. Yeah, he blots out. So you just get rid of the sin. Pray 5 times. Oh man,
that's the point. That is what you're supposed to do. This is the takeaway.
This is why they force their kids to pray so much. No, like pray all the time. Yeah.
Oh boy. All right, ladies, gents, and others, thank you very much. It's been, for me, it's been very entertaining. I hope it's been useful. So it's infotainment. In other words, it's informational and it's given you some entertainment. I hope you've learned something about Islam. And if it's not enough Islam for you, come and join us on Discord. I don't know if I'm feeling a bit grotty because I'm too young to get vaccinated with this COVID-19 thing. But now they've lifted all the restrictions, so there's no more priorities. So now I got my first shot yesterday, and I'm feeling, I don't know why, like okay, my left arm is sore, fine, that's okay. But I'm also feeling like, well, I don't know if this is normal with this vaccination. I have no idea.
I think it's normal. I did also get my first shot, and I had like a few side effects for a few days. And even my father and my sister had the similar side effects. You got Moderna or Pfizer, or which
Moderna.
one did you get? Moderna. Yeah. Moderna is pretty strong. It's going to give you some side effects.
Okay, so I'm excused.
Yes.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. I enjoyed the show today. I hope so have you. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Mustafa. And thank you very much to the people who have joined us in the chat. We didn't see too many questions, but we did see some nice comments, so that's very nice. That's the 5 beers you drank on top of the shot. That's what it is. You see, I knew there was a problem with that shot. It's been fun, and I hope to see you next week on Friday on the Gin and Tonic Show, where we're going to have more information. If anybody, and I can't stress this enough, if anybody has some sort of specialist knowledge, please come over. Please, bring this to the table, bring it up. Even if you're a Muslim, if you want to bring something up here, please do. If you want us to critique a specific video, please let us know. If there's any topic that you want us to discuss, just come on over. We are very accessible and we don't bite at all. Thank you, guys. See you next week. Good night.
Good night.